Hey guys, today we drift into the gilded salons of 18th century France. A world of powdered wigs, mirrored ballrooms, and fruit so rare it was guarded like royal treasure. Tonight, you're about to enter the court of Versailles, where the air smells faintly of rosewater and roasted pheasant. But your eyes, they lock on something else entirely. It's not the velvet gowns or the fluttering fans. It's a spiky golden fruit that sits alone on a pedestal, glowing like a relic from some tropical shrine. A pineapple. You inch closer, and a servant moves to block you. Touching it is forbidden. Tasting it? Even worse. You're not ready for how dangerous this story gets. You probably won't survive this much fruity opulence. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know your local time and where you're listening from. I always love seeing where this little bedtime adventure ends up. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through the marble corridors of Versailles, your silk slippers silent against cold floors. The halls are quieter than you expected, just the murmur of flattery and courtly laughter. But then, in a sun-drenched salon, you see it. There, on a velvet-draped table surrounded by whispers and gloved fingers pointing with restrained awe, sits the strangest thing in the room. A pineapple. Not sliced, not served, just sitting. Alone. Regal. You blink, thinking it might be a centerpiece or perhaps a wax imitation. But no, it's real. Imported at great cost from the French colonies, possibly Martinique or Guadeloupe. Weeks at sea, swaddled like a baby monarch, and now resting under candlelight as if it's royalty itself. You want to laugh, but everyone else is too busy bowing metaphorically to the fruit. The courtier next to you leans in and whispers, "It's the king's own." Louis XV, the beloved, had a taste for rare things. And when he wasn't commissioning fountains shaped like Neptune, or polishing his hunting lodge with actual gold, he was parading pineapples like trophies. He would sometimes gift them to visiting nobles, just to watch them gasp, then quietly reclaim the fruit before anyone dared slice it open. The pineapple had power. And you? You were just a visitor in its orbit. Let's rewind a bit. In the early 1700s, France's colonial ambitions extended far beyond Europe's borders. Sugar plantations in the Caribbean produced not just sweeteners, but strange tropical cargo that trickled back to the royal kitchens. Among these, the pineapple, Ananas commosus, emerged as the ultimate luxury object. It wasn't food, it was theater. No joke. By weight, pineapples were more valuable than gold. A single fruit might be equivalent to a small horse or a month's rent in Paris. But you wouldn't buy it to eat. No. You'd rent it, just to display it at your party, then return it to the supplier if no one stole it first. In the salons of the nobility, the fruit's spiky crown became a fashion motif. There's even one poorly documented claim, though we really want it to be true, that a duchess had a wig styled into a pineapple top. You can picture it now, 20 inches tall, lacquered to near crispy perfection. A pastry chef's nightmare come to life. At Versailles, gardeners were given impossible orders. "Grow them here," the king allegedly said, "so we can stop paying the Dutch." And so, the pineapple race began. Enclosed orangeries were repurposed into hothouses. They used techniques like underground heating beds, dung-fired walls, yes, horse poop insulation, and even elaborate mirror systems to redirect sunlight like botanical lasers. Still, results were disappointing. France's latitude didn't exactly scream tropical bounty, and pineapple plants were notoriously picky. But failure didn't matter. The effort looked impressive, and in 18th century France, appearance was 9/10 of politics. You pass a courtier complaining that his gardener hasn't produced a decent fruit in months. Just make one out of marzipan. Someone jokes. Laughter ripples. You chuckle quietly until you hear someone mention an artist who did just that with mashed turnips and food dye. He was awarded a minor medal by the Academy of Arts. True story. Still, actual pineapples were a mark of divine opulence. To receive one as a gift was like being anointed with tropical gold. And to be seen with one in your possession, that was status beyond silk or titles. It meant you were part of something juicy and rare. Some aristocrats began throwing pineapple salons, where guests wouldn't eat, but simply look at the pineapple. Maybe sniff it if they were feeling rebellious. One scandalous pamphlet of the time suggested that a guest was thrown out of the Duc de Noailles' home for poking a fruit too aggressively. The pineapple had bodyguards. And yet, behind the opulence, a different question starts gnawing at your mind. How many of these pineapples were actually French-grown? You ask. And the answer is complicated. Historians still argue whether the court's so-called French pineries ever produced fruit at scale, or if it was all imported and whitewashed to preserve pride. Some say Versailles managed maybe 3 or 4 pineapples a year. Others insist it was closer to none. But the myth was already baked in. You notice that people stop talking when someone enters the room carrying a pineapple. Their eyes follow the fruit like it's a comet. Someone clears their throat. A musician pauses mid-sonata. A single fruit commands a court's attention like a royal baby, and probably costs more to feed. And you? You're still hungry. But don't reach for the pineapple. That would be your last mistake. You wake to a faint rustle outside your chamber. A footman whispering, "They've brought one to the Duc d'Orléans." You sit up. Not a baby, not a mistress, a pineapple. You scramble into your shoes and make your way down candlelit halls, still smelling faintly of beeswax and cinnamon. By the time you reach the garden terrace, there's already a small crowd gathered. They're not looking at the stars. No, they're gathered around a display table, on which rests a single pineapple, encased in a glass dome, like some holy relic. The Duke himself gestures proudly, as if he just returned from war with the severed head of a mythical beast. And that, you realize, is what this has become. A pineapple arms race. It's no longer about the fruit. It's about the optics. Who can flaunt the biggest, brightest, most absurdly spiked golden crown this side of the Caribbean? Who can pretend theirs was grown locally, even though everyone knows they bribed a sailor at the port of Brest? The gloves are off. Well, not literally. This is still Versailles. You watch a woman nearly faint from excitement. Someone else sketches the fruit into a miniature portrait. And the whisper starts again. "I heard the Comte de Rohan has 2 pineapples ripening in secret." Another voice cuts in. "Impossible! His gardener couldn't coax a tomato to blush." The nobles begin hiring exotic botanists and engineers to devise fruit hothouses. Gigantic glass structures heated with coal, dung, or in one unfortunate case, a misplaced candle that burned down an entire wing of a summer estate. You stroll past one such pinery in the Loire Valley, a maze of glazed brick, warm troughs, and copper piping. The gardeners treat the pineapples like babies, tucking them into beds of moss, measuring humidity, talking to them in soothing tones. Your guide brags that they use angled mirrors to concentrate solar devotion. You nod slowly, pretending this makes sense. It doesn't. But the pineapple does look smug. One name keeps cropping up. Jean-Baptiste de la Quintini, the late royal botanist who once designed the king's kitchen gardens. Legend has it he tried to use pineapple diplomacy to impress visiting foreign dignitaries, lining pathways with the plants and hoping they would believe Versailles was growing them en masse. Most guests were too polite, or confused, to question it. Some historians even suggest that pineapples were paraded during treaty negotiations. Imagine that. A spiky fruit in one hand, a quill in the other. Still, not all experiments succeeded. One unfortunate noble in Bordeaux, attempted to grow pineapples indoors using steam from his wine distillery. All he got was mildew and a severely confused gardener. Then there's the case of the turnip pineapple. Yes, one especially crafty chef, desperate not to disappoint during a banquet, sculpted an entire pineapple replica out of mashed turnips, beet juice, and toasted almond flakes for texture. The guests applauded the lifelike craftsmanship. The king? He declared it worthy of Rome. They knighted the chef 2 weeks later. You suppress a laugh, imagining the ceremony. Of course, none of this madness comes cheap. Rival nobles start stealing pineapples, or at least accusing each other of doing so. One gossip sheet reports that a baroness poisoned her neighbor's soil just to delay his harvest. Another story, possibly fake but endlessly delicious, claims a footman was caught trying to smuggle a pineapple seedling in his powdered wig. You're invited to a dinner hosted by the Marchioness of Montesson. It's all silver plates, quail eggs, and violins, but no one's eating. Because in the center of the table is a pineapple, wearing a tiny gold crown. You lean in to get a better look and realize it's not real. It's blown glass, pure crystal. But no one dares mention it. The illusion must be protected. You sip your wine and wonder if anyone remembers what pineapples actually taste like. Then someone loudly proclaims, "Mine bloomed in Marseille last month." A ripple of tension moves across the room. Everyone knows Marseille is too dry, but no one challenges the claim, at least not tonight. Here's something odd. Horse manure. It's everywhere in pineapple cultivation. French horticulturists relied on hotbeds, piles of decomposing manure that generate heat, to keep their precious plants from freezing in the night. So yes, somewhere beneath all this elegance and powdered lace, the success of your pineapple empire hinges on steaming piles of dung. Talk about noble rot. You wander outside to clear your head and spot a group of young nobles arguing. One says he'll name his first son Ananas, just to solidify the family legacy. Another rolls his eyes and declares that pineapples will never go out of style. You take a mental note to check back on that one later. Historians still argue whether these ridiculous pineapple competitions actually contributed to France's culinary golden age. Some believe they pushed chefs and gardeners alike to new levels of creativity, just to keep up appearances. Others insist it was just a series of petty stunts, glorified fruit cosplay. But either way, you can't deny the spectacle. The pineapple has become both obsession and ornament, more valuable than sugar, silk, or even sapphires. For now, you glance around the ballroom one last time. Gold leaf glimmers on the ceiling. Perfumed air wafts over you like warm cake. And at the center of it all, glowing beneath its own oil lamp, the pineapple sits, unchallenged, untasted, but entirely triumphant, until someone tries to eat it. You stand on a crowded Parisian street, clutching a handbill fresh off a printing press. The paper smells like ink and vinegar, and the cartoon etched on the front makes your stomach tighten. A pineapple, wearing a powdered wig, sits atop a guillotine. The caption reads, "Fruit of the devil, symbol of the aristocrat's stomach." You'd laugh if it weren't so. Tense out here. Gone are the days of giggling footmen and pineapple banquets. Now, the crowds are different, grittier, hungrier, less interested in crystal centerpieces and more in bread. You spot a ragged vendor shouting, "A whiff for 1 sou!" and realize he's pointing at a rotting pineapple sealed inside a glass jar. People line up to sniff it. You back away slowly. You're witnessing the death rattle of the pineapple's reign. Inside salons, it's still possible to see the last flickers of excess. You're invited to an edible poetry evening at the home of a marquise whose fortune now hangs by a thread. The table is modest, but the pineapple, just one, sits like a fossilized sun. It's not to be touched, of course, merely admired while poets recite verses about tropical yearning. The windows are open. From outside, a child shouts, "Eat it, you cowards!" Things are cracking. Rumors swirl. A delivery cart filled with pineapples was allegedly stoned by peasants in Rouen. Some say it never happened. Others claim the driver escaped disguised as a priest. Either way, you don't want to be seen holding one in public anymore. And yet, the court presses on. You find yourself once again back at Versailles, in the echoing silence of the Petit Trianon. There, in Marie Antoinette's private salon, the queen has taken things further. She has commissioned a set of porcelain pineapple dishes, dainty cups and saucers, all painted with golden spines and little crowns. Each piece is hand-fired, polished with sugar glaze, and worth more than most cottages. You hold one gingerly. It feels like rebellion waiting to happen. In fact, it is, because word is spreading. The people, starving and furious, have begun to associate pineapples with everything wrong in France. Decadence, detachment. That smug, spiky fruit becomes the poster child of privilege. Not officially, of course, but symbolically, it's everywhere. One pamphlet, crudely illustrated, shows nobles building a fortress out of pineapples, while peasants weep outside. Another suggests the king only eats pineapple while his subjects gnaw on boiled bark. Untrue, but emotionally effective. A poet is imprisoned for publishing a sonnet titled, "The Golden Fruit Eats the Poor." He compares the fruit's hard exterior and sweet core to the heart of a duke. It's not even that clever, but it rhymed, and that was enough. You wander into a back alley tavern where the barkeep serves pineapple punch, made from vinegar and crushed apples. Mock the monarchy, mock their taste. He says with a wink, "It tastes horrible. You drink it anyway." Fact. Revolutionary pamphlets began including pineapples in their satire art, alongside wigs, corsets, and gilded carriages. Anything spiky, golden, or ostentatious was fair game. But the worst was yet to come. You're there, purely by accident, you swear, when the gates of Versailles are breached. The crowd surges like a wave, furious and loud and starving for change. You're pushed into a corner, ducking as a vase flies past your ear. In the chaos, someone knocks over a display table. A pineapple rolls dramatically across the marble, bumped by boots, unnoticed. You pick it up. It's bruised, its skin dented. The crowd doesn't care. No one bows to it anymore. A few months later, you find yourself in Paris again, watching from a quiet cafe as someone auctions off the last known pineapple in the city. No one bids. Instead, a young girl walks up to the stage, takes the fruit, and throws it into the Seine. The crowd cheers. The symbol is dead. But is it? Because just when you think the fruit has been fully buried beneath revolutionary rubble, it shows up again, on buttons, in paintings, etched into the panels of old court furniture. The revolution didn't erase the pineapple. It baked it into memory. Historians still argue whether the pineapple's fall was spontaneous or staged, whether it genuinely lost favor or was purposefully executed in the court of public opinion. But one thing's for sure. You never look at a fruit basket the same again. You visit a post-revolutionary kitchen where a tired cook slices a potato and sighs, "It's not a pineapple, but it won't get me guillotined." You nod. Fair point. And as you step into the gray morning, the city still smells of ash and bread and something faintly sweet. You step into a modest bourgeois parlor, lace curtains, floral wallpaper, and the faint aroma of oversteeped tea. On the table sits a pineapple. Or does it? You squint. The color's slightly off. The texture is too matte. You lean in, tap it. Hollow. Wax. This, dear listener, is a faux pineapple. The latest obsession of the upwardly ambitious French middle class. Post-revolution, the actual fruit is too politically loaded and far too expensive. But the symbol still sparkles. It whispers, "Look at me. I'm not aristocracy, but I could have been." So the merchants get clever. You visit a kitchen in Lyon where an entire pineapple is being assembled from dyed cabbage leaves and a painted baguette core. The matron giggles. "For guests only," she says. "They mustn't touch it." It looks decent, from 2 meters away, closer than that, and it's cabbage cosplay. And they're everywhere. Pineapples carved from soap, stitched onto aprons, painted onto perfume bottles. The designs are slightly clumsy, sometimes even anatomically incorrect. You've never seen a pineapple with 9 crowns before. But the intent is clear. The pineapple may have lost its throne, but it now rules the Republic of Imitation. You enter a milliner's shop, where a line of hats sports pineapple-inspired trims. One even has a stalked green ribbon that bobs as the wearer walks. "For the bold," the maker whispers. You ask if it sells. "Only to widows," he replies. In the military district, you notice something stranger. A regiment's ceremonial buttons are engraved with, you guessed it, a pineapple. When asked why, the officer shrugs and says, "It's exotic and sharp." Then one day you hear the whispers, "Napoleon hates pineapples." At first, you think it's a joke, but the more you dig, the more it checks out. Bonaparte, that short-tempered, strategy-obsessed titan of order, apparently detested the fruit, not for its taste, but for what it represented. He saw it as wasteful, royalist fluff. He once allegedly banned a general from serving pineapple punch at a diplomatic dinner. "France will not serve symbols of Versailles," he supposedly growled. No one dared ask him if he meant the fruit or the lifestyle. Still, the irony is hard to ignore, because while he rails against pineapple frippery, you spot it in the backrooms of Paris. Bakeries selling pineapple-shaped pastries. Cafes offering ananas républicain cocktails, which contain no pineapple whatsoever. And furniture makers carving the motif into chair legs and balustrades. It's no longer about taste. It's about status theater. Fact. In the early 1800s, pineapple imagery quietly crept into decorative arts, particularly among the newly empowered merchant class. It became a subtle way to say, "I survived the revolution and still have flair." And then, there's the jailer. Oh yes, you remember this one. He's a minor civil servant with a flair for deception. The story goes that he once tricked a desperate noblewoman into handing over her remaining gold by pretending to gift her a smuggled pineapple. In truth, it was a turnip soaked in rum and rolled in sugar. She wept with gratitude. He bought new shoes. Fringe? Perhaps, but poetic. Absolutely. You stroll down a side street in Marseille and pass a tiny museum that claims to have the last Republican pineapple preserved in resin. It's lumpy, brown, and possibly just a moldy melon. But a placard beside it reads, "The fruit of dreams, the lie we loved." You stand there for a moment longer than you should. Historians still argue whether the pineapple's revival was ironic or earnest. Some say it was a cheeky rebellion against Napoleon's austerity. Others insist it was a psychological residue. France couldn't shake the spiky silhouette, even after it fell from grace. But you, standing in a shop holding a pineapple-shaped soap dish, realize something truer. The fruit doesn't matter anymore. It's the idea that lives on. You exit the shop, passing a child tugging his mother's sleeve. "Look, maman, a golden fruit like in the old stories." The mother nods wistfully. But that was before everything changed. And you wonder, did it really change? Or did the pineapple just find a cheaper disguise? You step through the iron gate of an abandoned orangery on the outskirts of what used to be noble land. Weeds curl around the doorway like forgotten dancers, and shattered panes above you still catch glints of evening light. The air smells of damp moss and faded citrus. Here, they once tried to grow pineapples. You walk slowly, your feet brushing past old ceramic pots and rotted trellises. Somewhere beneath the cracked tiles, a coal pipe still rests cold, its purpose long extinguished. The walls, once whitewashed and pristine, are now flaking, paint curling like old parchment. You reach the back corner. There, sitting under a dust-covered bell jar, is a dried pineapple. Not preserved, not embalmed, just forgotten. Its crown is half broken. Its skin is dark and sunken. You don't know if it was ever truly ripe. And yet, there's something heartbreakingly regal about it. A dethroned monarch, yes, but one who once ruled the glittering salons of Versailles with nothing more than a scent and a silhouette. You sit on a nearby stone bench and take in the silence. This is where it ended, but in another way, it never did. Because you start noticing echoes, pineapples on old fireplace mantels, carved into chairbacks, still embroidered into the borders of faded handkerchiefs. Not loud anymore, just there, like a soft memory humming beneath the surface of modern France. You stroll into a culinary school in Paris on a whim. A group of students is gathered around a wooden table, watching a chef demonstrate the Versailles cut, a delicate way of slicing the fruit into spirals meant to preserve its symmetry. Fact: some French culinary schools still teach this method, not because it's practical, but because it's beautiful. One student jokes, "The king would approve." Another murmurs, "If he could afford it." They all laugh, but there's a quiet respect too, reverence. Even now, the pineapple demands performance. You spot a museum pamphlet advertising an unusual exhibit, Tropical Fantasies of the Ancien Régime. Among the paintings and curiosities is a peculiar piece, what curators believe is the oldest surviving pineapple in France, petrified inside a crystal case. It's labeled, "Un ananas perdu," the lost fruit. Fringe as it sounds, there are stories, barely credible, of aristocrats who had their pineapples dried and sealed forever as keepsakes. Not to eat, not to display, but to remember. You stare at it for a long time. You could swear it's looking back. Outside, Paris bustles. Cafes hum. Tourists photograph monuments. Delivery trucks beep as they pass. And in the produce aisle of a modest supermarket, a fresh pineapple sits for $3.99. No fanfare, no guards, just fruit. You lift it, feel its weight, and smile. Historians still argue whether the pineapple's fall from grace marked a shift in French culture, or whether it was just the inevitable fate of a symbol overripe with meaning. Some say its decline mirrored the collapse of aristocratic power. Others claim it simply got boring. But you believe it became something better. It became quiet. You take a walk by the Seine, the sun low and warm. You imagine a time when people gathered in candlelight to whisper about the shape of a fruit, when it meant everything, when it meant too much. And now it's just a taste, a flavor, a summer note on your tongue. Maybe that's all it ever needed to be. You slow your pace now, easing your thoughts back from velvet-draped ballrooms and candlelit orangeries. The scent of sugar fades, and the sharp edges of golden crowns soften into memory. Imagine the hush of that old greenhouse again, the way dust dances in the sunbeams, the gentle creak of ivy reclaiming what once held grandeur. The world outside might have moved on, but inside those worn stones, a quiet royalty still lingers. You stretch your limbs, nestle deeper into your blanket, and let the last echoes of powdered wigs and porcelain fruit drift away. No need to carry it all into tomorrow. Just let it float, like a pineapple crown on calm water. Breathe in, let it out slow. You've wandered far tonight, seen absurdity, ambition, revolution, and through it all, a spiky little fruit that once ruled France's imagination. Sleep now, traveler of history. The lights are dim, the fan hums, and the fruit is finally at rest.